We have two All Saints readings this morning. Each of these readings imagine heaven a little bit differently. As you hear these readings, I invite you to consider what you've heard about heaven, what images are resonant for you, and what images you hear in these readings. First, a teaching from Jesus, a familiar one from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And from the book of Revelation, chapter 7, verses 9 through 12. After this, I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands. They cried out in a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb." And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God. Well, friends, I am lucky to have had not one, not two, but three grandmothers. Three people who utterly spoiled me. Three people who passed down traditions. Three people from whom I learned how to be a woman in the world. From them, I learned how to play Scrabble and make gin drinks, how to bake a killer apple pie and ride a roller coaster without crying, how to appreciate costume jewelry and romance novels. They were three very different women and very amazing women. I am lucky to have had three grandmothers and unlucky enough to have experienced the death of all three in a period of just over a year, about 5 years ago. And after they died, I had to make sense of who I was without these women and who my family was without this entire generation, living into that mystery of where their souls were now that they were gone from the earth. We've seen a couple of images today already about heaven. I think that cheerleading image, the people who stand behind us and encourage us and cheer for us, that image that Adam and Jan evoked, is an image of heaven. And so is that image that Mary Jo evoked of a garden where our saints might rest and return to the earth, surrounded by the beauty of flowers, newness bursting forth, near to their community of faith. I wonder what images you have of heaven, where you imagine your saints. I want to invite you to call them out if you want. How do you imagine heaven? Memories. joys, peaceful, unity. Can you repeat that, Rob?
Green and rivers flowing.
Green with rivers flowing.
Mystery.
Mystery.
Dinner table.
A dinner table. Beautiful music. Did you say candles, Geneva? Candles. Babies. Beautiful images. Beautiful images. Well, 5 years ago, my imagination was running all over the place, thinking about heaven, trying to come up with what this place or what this experience, where their souls were and what that might be like. And at the time, I was taking a short fiction class where the professor assigned Flannery O'Connor's short story titled Revelation. As I imagined where my grandmother's souls resided and what was awaiting us beyond this life, I read O'Connor's take on the issue, and man, does she ever have a vision of heaven. The story goes something like this. Mrs. Turpin is the manifestation of all the characteristics we try not to acknowledge in ourselves. She's judgmental. She's self-aggrandizing. She thinks she's always right. Her life is like each one of, I'll claim it for myself. Her life is like each one of my most uncharitable moments combined and distilled into a single human being. Mrs. Turpin accompanies her husband to the doctor, and in the waiting room she starts making pleasant conversation with her fellow waiters, mostly about her own greatness and how glad she is that she's not like other people. Those people. The ones who haven't worked as hard and don't deserve as much as she does. She has very clear ideas about who God thinks is best. And she muses that heaven will include all the hardworking, generous, kind people just like her. And she starts creating this stratification system. She's better than this person sitting next to her, but maybe not as good as this other one, but close. And she's thinking about it, but then she starts verbalizing it. She feels like she'd be near the front of the line. She tells everyone in the waiting room that that's what she thinks. And this story's true hero is a teenage girl who does what I think most of us would. She throws a textbook at Mrs. Turpin's head. Later that evening, Mrs. Turpin begins to have a vision. Who knows if it's from the heat of the day, or her blossoming concussion, or a reckoning with God. She has this vision where she sees heaven, in stark contrast to her earlier commentary. It's a beautiful place. There is beautiful music. It's green, rivers flowing, and it flips Mrs. Turpin's story on its head. First in line are all the people she's been reviling. And what do we do with that vision? A vision where people we don't like, people we think of as the bad guys, people we'd never choose to spend eternity with, people who are imperfect just like us. What do we do with a vision of heaven that includes everybody? We read from the book of Revelation a vision of heaven that inspired O'Connor's story, a vision so expansive, so all-encompassing. People of every nation and tribe and people and language, all of them worshiping together and entering heaven together and rejoicing together. This vision of heaven notably includes not just Jews but also Gentiles, which was noteworthy for the time. It signified a drawing in of the people who were placed outside the bounds of society, pulling them into the inner circle. These expansive and inclusive visions of heaven are challenging but also comforting and powerfully uniting. Every day it feels like the chasms that divide us grow wider. We are politically divided, we are ideologically divided, we are racially divided, we are divided by education and class. I don't have to list these all off for you, I know that we all feel it. The Revelation vision of heaven is scary but appealing. It's comforting to think of our loved ones surrounded by God's love, no matter what. It's hopeful to think that maybe after death, we might get this whole unity thing right. But what if we didn't have to wait until heaven to break down those barriers? What if that kind of unity were possible now? On All Saints' Day, we call to mind one of our universal human experiences, grief. And perhaps we share even more in our shared humanity. We read from the Gospel of Matthew, the Beatitudes, "Blessed are." It's a series of blessings, but I want to invite us to think about these also as a series of human longings. Blessed are the meek. We all have felt meek, or if we haven't yet, we will. We have been afraid. We've longed for power and control, a voice with which to speak our truth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We have all hungered and thirsted for righteousness. Or if we haven't yet, we will. We've experienced injustice. We've had the eye-opening experience of our own complicity in that injustice. We know that even with all the beauty in our world, all is not how it ought to be. Blessed are the merciful. We have all longed for mercy, or if we haven't yet, we will. We have all experienced the world to be uncompassionate at times. We've longed for compassion when we've struggled. We've felt called to show compassion to others. Blessed are the pure in heart. We've all longed for pureness of heart, or if we haven't yet, we will. The world pulls us in so many different directions. We have so many intentions. We have longed for the simplicity of a heart that is pulled in a single direction, a single guiding force for our lives. Blessed are the peacemakers. We have all longed for peace, or if we haven't yet, we will. We've seen the conflict that arises in our world, in our communities, in our own relationships. We long for reconciliation. Blessed are those who mourn. We have all mourned, or if we haven't yet, we will. We have longed for comfort when we lose someone we love, a comfort that somehow explains and transcends the pain of our loss. The depth of our human longing is universal, and it's never more significant than on All Saints' Day. If we are lucky, we all experience the kind of love that hurts when we lose it. And the beautiful thing is that even as we long for what is possible, even as we live into those longings, we receive God's blessing. Every one of us has been to hard places, has been through hard things. Some of us are living there now, and every one of us will be there again. But in the midst of all of it is blessing. This assurance that God understands what it is to be human. God, too, has been to hard places and been through hard things. God has even died. And so God dwells with us in the pain and the exquisite joy of being human. And God offers that solidarity and that blessing to everyone. The blessing of our shared humanity. In the midst of division, in the midst of grief, in the midst of what feels like a very difficult moment in history, there is a light shining. There is the promise of resurrection in the face of death. There is a call on this day when we recognize our shared humanity to unite in all that we share, to unite in compassion and care, to, in a few minutes, join around a table where we share the gifts of bread and cup, fulfillment and forgiveness with all of our saints who have ever gathered around the same table. We remember that God's arms are wide, and the table is large, and every one of us is invited into its blessing. Thanks be to God. Amen.